My name is Mike Harris. As Linda said, I am the chairman of the QC4, QC7 committee, which is now changing into the QC47 committee as we're working hard to try to get that document out, hopefully next year. But in my real world job, as people tell me, I'm the program administrator for the International Training Institute. As Dennis said, we are the training branch of the Sheet Metal Workers Union for the United States and Canada. So we have, within that, we oversee or support approximately 150 apprenticeship programs throughout the United States and Canada. Not all of which teach welding, but a majority of them do.
Total workforce is what, 150,000?
About 150,000 members in those two countries. We had a facility in Puerto Rico for a while, but they dissolved due to lack of work down there. But beside the point, we've been very involved in the ATF program from the very beginning. As a matter of fact, in preparing for this presentation, I spoke to some of our elders, I guess you would say. Some of the people who were there at the beginning, and if their history is correct, we were the second accredited test facility AWS ever accredited. So that goes back to the mid-80s, I believe, is when he said that was. I think the presenter tomorrow, I seen Bob Wiswesser speaking. I think his facility was the first ATF. But so we've been working in the ATF system for a long time. And prior to us getting involved with the American Welding Society and the ATF system, we had our own welding program that kind of morphed into the ATF program. So I'll give you a little bit of history as we go through. Obviously, like I said, we are a training organization, so we focus a lot of our stuff on training, and we feel like that's what makes our ATFs strong. We put additional requirements on our ATFs outside, on top of what QC4 and QC7 do. We are considered what's ATFs, or what AWS calls a custom program. Some of you didn't even know that that existed because QC4 doesn't address custom programs at all. As Linda's presentation just a minute ago said, in QC47 there is a whole section to address custom programs. Give you just a little bit of history of our trade or our involvement. As I said, in the early 80s, or early to mid 80s, we had our first ATF accredited, and that was in San Jose, California. It's one of our schools that had a lot of welding at that particular time. We then morphed into, we didn't have a lot of people that were interested in the ATF program at that time, but we had a lot of people that wanted welding certifications. So we morphed into, our staff became CWIs, our welding staff, and we put them in mobile welding labs. They all drove full-size vans that had tinsel pullers, bend testers, portable saws, all that kind of stuff in it. And the AWS came in and accredited those vans as ATFs. So we had, I think, at max, we had, I think, 8 running around this country at one time. Like I said, that was in the mid-80s to the mid-90s. Well, you know, with 8 guys covering the whole country, because we service all of our membership, which, like we said, was 150,000, and we service all of our contractors, which there's over 3,500 of them. So for any problems they have, we have to go and respond. Well, as you can imagine, those 8 guys never seen home very often. They were on the road quite a bit, still are, but you know, we were running them ragged. So about in the mid-90s, we had a big push for we were tired of driving these vans around. And we weren't being as effective as we could be because that van is still limited to how many boosts that facility has, and they don't really have skin in the game. All they know is they should be able to call you and want you there the next day. As I heard one of the presenters earlier said, the welding industry is always in a state of emergency. I agree with that. You never get to call for certified welders until the job started a week ago. So I'm with you on that. But So in the mid-90s, we had a big push for our apprenticeship centers, our training centers, to become accredited test facilities. Those that were using the welding services we offered at that time, we pushed them to become ATFs. And when we did, that's when we really started to focus on our system and how we were going to do this for all of these facilities. We didn't know how many we were going to take at one time. And obviously, as most of you know, to get people to move and to do anything is hard. So we did what any person would do to get people involved. We bribed them with incentives, right? So we were giving ATFs free welders and things like that if they would get somebody certified and go through our program. So in the mid-90s, we had a big push. We had a lot of our people come on board, and we've maintained those ATFs for the most part throughout the years. One of the things that I know this gentleman over here said a little bit ago that caught my ear was, you go to become a CWI, you go take a test, you go take a seminar maybe, and a week later, you take your test, and in a couple of weeks, you're a CWI. And many of you in this room, I'm sure, are CWIs or have been through that process. One thing we realized early on in our ATF program is that when you become a CWI, none of the training is about testing welders. It's about inspection, which it should be. But in the document, you can qualify welders, procedures, all that good stuff that people do, but there's no training on it. So one of the things that we focused on being a training organization is that we wanted to make sure we trained our personnel in these ATFs, because how we're kind of set up is the ITI as the mother organization, we are set up to where the AWS comes and audits us once a year. They come into our headquarters, they audit all of our records that we have. We maintain the records on all of our facilities. And then in turn, we have what we call welding assessors, ITI welding assessors. We're currently down to 4 because we just had 2 retire on us. I tried to talk them out of it, but hey, I'm very jealous that they were able to retire. But we have what we call 4 welding assessors. Those welding assessors basically are the people that run our program. I'm one of those welding assessors. They sit on various AWS code committees. I sit on certification committee, and as I said, I'm the chair of the subcommittee for the ATFs. But we have some that sit on D1, D12, 13, 16. So we're very involved with the society in other areas other than just the ATF. But we also, our assessors have to go to training at the AWS on auditing every 2 years. And talking to Linda, I think we got one coming up at the end of this year that we'll be going to. But that teaches us how to audit, and by going to that training, the AWS allows us and our assessors to audit our ATFs. Okay? That way it saves our ATFs money because they don't have to pay anything for the audit, because we do it for free basically, because we're funded on a cents per hour basis. Every hour that a member works, they pay so many cents into our fund. So they're basically paying us as they work, so we don't charge them to perform some of these functions. So it saves our JATCs money, which, as we all know, education kind of gets, especially when the economy goes bad, people want to cut education and all kinds of stuff, but so we try to keep it as reasonable for the JATCs as possible. And I'll talk about some other things that make us custom and that are kind of a little bit outside of the box as I go through my presentation. But the welding assessors, we also are involved heavily in putting on our training courses for the other personnel in the ATFs. Other personnel in our facilities. Obviously, we have to have a facility rep, technical manager, as Linda was saying, and you've heard in some of the ATF presentations before. We currently have 101 of these in the country. We don't have any ATFs in Canada because they have to be governed by the Canadian Welding Bureau, or they want to be governed by the Canadian Welding Bureau, I should say. So currently don't have any in Canada, but we have them on the border, so That's the best we could do. But the facility reps, these are the people that can provide legal and binding responses to any problem in their particular ATF. Generally, it's the training director, coordinator, or business representative for that area. They have to attend a 1-week training class, which I'll talk about in a second. We have test supervisors, currently have 226 of those in the country. Our test supervisors obviously are the people that can give our test, and you have to be a test supervisor in our program to give a test in one of our ATFs. Our test supervisors, as the QC4 document states, have to be CWIs. Consequently, we offer a CWI training course for our members, and then the AWS comes in and tests them at the end, because we want to offer from A to Z when it comes to our program. So we have 226 of them total. Some of them can be the facility rep, as was asked earlier. Some of them are, some of them aren't. Our test supervisors are allowed to test welders. They are not allowed to qualify procedures. They are not allowed to, do any PQRs or WPSs. But they are allowed to qualify testing. They have to go through a week's training that we have too, which is, imagine this, called test supervisor course. But, and this is the same course we make the facility reps go through. But that week's training is all geared, as this gentleman said, to teaching them how to give a test. They've never been trained on how to give a test. What paperwork do they need to do? What paperwork do they need to keep for the ATF program? When we come in and audit, like I said, we have some custom things that are outside of QC4 that we have been agreed upon by the AWS that we have to make sure they're maintaining and doing. So they go through that week's training. We also go through QC4 and QC7 currently with them, so they understand the whole program. We run them through a mock ATF audit just so they know what to expect when they go home and put together their ATF. So it's a pretty comprehensive program, but most importantly what we do in that class is we teach them how to use our welding database. The AWS has a welding database. You call that number and they can tell you whether somebody's certified or not. We have our own database, and it's really how we control our ATFs, because we can control what permissions each level has. Facility rep doesn't have to be a CWI, so consequently they can't create test records or WPSs or anything like that. They can view them, but they can't create them because they're not a CWI in our program. A test supervisor, he's only got access, he can view WPSs, he can view PQRs and print them, but he can't create them. He can create test records because that's what his job is. Then we have a category called a Weld Supervisor, which is, we had this way before the AWS had certified Weld Supervisor, but ours is different than what theirs is. The Weld Supervisor, once again, we have another week's training course that they would have to come to, and this is where we teach them how to qualify procedures, how to properly write WPSs from those PQRs, and do things of that nature. So they're a step above. And whenever a facility, not every facility has a welding supervisor, but they have to have a test supervisor and a facility rep in order to be a ATF in our program. But the weld supervisor, if they have one, they act as kind of the go-to guy for that area, for their contractors and things of that nature, to help us out so our assessors aren't killing themselves constantly. But we know that they know what they're doing because they've been trained. We've ran them through a mock procedure qualification. We've taught them how to use the database. They have pretty much full access to our database. So that's the personnel, and that's how we train our personnel. Currently, we have 88 active accredited test facilities, and we have 13 which we are put on hold. So totally, we have 101 facilities. And when I say they're put on hold, these are facilities that were accredited and maybe they're CWI retired. or God forbid, he forgot to renew his CWI. But they have somebody, and that happens, trust me. Something is going on with that ATF where they're kind of not in compliance with our QA system. So until they become back, we can put them on hold. And when we do that, like I said, we can control through the database. We go in and put their facility on hold. It won't let them create any test records, regardless of what position they hold. It puts everything basically on hold until they do it. And it could be too that when we go in, we look for nonconformances as well, and we issue nonconformance reports just like the AWS auditors do. And while they're fixing those nonconformances, we put their facility on hold until we're sure that they're providing what they're supposed to be providing. Dennis, on his presentation just a little bit ago, he said one of the problems they had with the ATF system and their thing was there was no continuity amongst quality systems because everybody had their own. The way we're set up at the national level in our organization, we write the quality manual that every one of our facilities has to go by. And we meet 3 times a year, as our welding assessors do, to update and modify that quality manual. We post it once a year. We change it once a year. Every January 1st, there's a new quality manual. It's posted on a secured website that only our welding people have access to. But they are required to go in every year. Anything we've changed, they have to know it. We audit to it. So it's pretty obvious if we change forms and stuff, because we always have revision dates when we go into audit. It's pretty obvious if they've done what they're supposed to, because they're using the wrong forms if not. But so, that's one of the unique things we have, is that ability to really cut people off if we need to and give them the access if they qualify for it. Because, if you're an ATF outside of that system right now, if the AWS says you're not accredited, a lot of people still have the shingle on their wall, you know what I mean? Not to say that should be done, but we all know that it could be done. Okay, I said I got 88 ATFs. Here's a map of all of our ATFs. As you can see, the Midwest, Northeast is the highest concentration of them. It's the highest concentration of people and jobs. It's kind of hard to see. You get out in the West, they're kind of spread out quite a bit. But if you go on the AWS's website and you click on the certification button, on the left-hand side, there's a section for accredited test facilities. They have accredited test facilities in the USA, then they have one for international, then they have one for the iron workers who have another custom program, and then they have one for the ITI/sheet metal workers, and that's ours. So if you just got to know where these places are, you can go look at that list, and it's all there. So I wish we had more, but hey, every little bit helps. Okay, one thing that a lot of people don't realize is the sheet metal industry, we deal with a barrage of codes, whereas the iron workers deal basically with the structural codes. Okay, we have contractors that weld from the thinnest of materials to, and if you're an iron worker, don't kill me, but we have some places that actually build structures, catwalks, things of that nature. We have some shops that work with 1.5 plate. So we're kind of a little bit, our craft, basically if it's metal, our craft will try it. Okay? But we haven't done metal studs in buildings yet, but I wouldn't put it past the contractor to give it a shot. So we deal with a lot of welding codes, and our assessors, myself included, I think that's what drew me to this, because it's not the same thing every day. If I was just dealing with D1 all the time, I'd probably go crazy. I deal with it enough, but being able to have to go to various codes, I like it. Some people say I'm weird, and I probably am, but that's okay. So we even have one contractor out in Oregon that does bridge work. So it's kind of interesting that a sheet metal contractor would do bridge work. We do deal with ASME. We have some ASME code shops. I didn't list that code on here. And we have some people that do some API work, although that's not very much. In the last 5-year period, because all of the welding is tracked on our database, I can run reports on it. In the last 5-year period, those 88 or /101 ATFs have given 10,812 welding or brazing certification. So a little over 2,000 a year. And those are ones that have actually passed. And those of you who have ever tested welders know that you don't have a 100% pass rate when they come in. Contractors don't like that because, you know, if they need 2 guys, they send you 2 guys. And then when you fail one of them, they get upset. But the rules are the rules. So if you have a 50% pass rate, I would say that's wonderful. So, you know, I'm saying they've given at least probably 22,000 certifications over the last 5 years. Are there any questions?